Hello, Fanshawe. Welcome to EDI Talks, a series of informal discussions aimed at raising awareness on equity-deserving topics in a safe, open space. This is part of our ongoing commitment towards removing systemic barriers on campus. EDI Talks features a different subject each month and is hosted by myself, Troy Townsend. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Anti-Racism and Inclusion Specialist here at Fanshawe, and we are in the Gollywi Circle in the Library Learning Commons today. Gollywi is an Oneida word meaning good message, and we're hoping to bring you some good messages today. March is Women's History Month, and March 8th is recognized as International Women's Day. This morning I have invited Michelle Baudouin to have a quick conversation with me. And Michelle, before we get into our discussion, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your role here at Fanshawe.
Okay, so I am the Vice President of Student Services, and I've been at Fanshawe since September 2016, and prior to that was at Georgian College for 26 years, so long time in the college system. And here at Fanshawe, the main services that report through me are the Library Learning Commons, so this wonderful space, Registrar and Financial Aid, Student Success, which includes counseling, accessibility, athletics, sort of student rights and responsibilities, and residence life and so on, so a wide range of services there. Retail services, some of the food services and bookstore operations and other services there. And the Indigenous Student Services also is another area that reports through me. So quite a broad portfolio right now. And we also work closely with International Center and with FSU to serve students right all across the college and all different profiles of student. On a personal note, I live in London and I moved here in 2016, and I have a son who's in Toronto, 28, now working, yay. And my mother's living here and she's 92, still on her own, and I have a sister who just moved here. So we got kind of a family thing going on in London now. And I was born here in London and moved around a bit. My dad was in the military, so yeah.
Well, welcome. Thank you very much for joining me today. Under that huge portfolio that you're responsible for, I understand how busy your schedule is, so I appreciate the time that you took.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to get right into some questions. As I mentioned, March 8th is now recognized worldwide as International Women's Day. Why do you think it's important to have a separate date just to acknowledge women?
Well, it's interesting. With everything going on in the world right now, I think a lot about history and how we tell history. And typically, and when I think of it back when I learned history, it was about wars and battles and sovereignty and so on, land ownership and all of that. So then I've often thought, what's the other half of the population doing during all of this time whose history hasn't been told, right? And so women, I think, have a history that hasn't been told. So that's one thing that's often on my mind when I think about history. And more currently, I was thinking about Russia and Ukraine and what's going on there. The mothers, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want to sacrifice their children on either side, and they would end this war in minutes if they had the power to do it. I'm sure of that. And yet I know when history's told, it's going to be about Putin, Zelensky, weapons, geopolitics. That's what the history is probably going to be around this war. So I think the kind of sacrifices that women make, in this case, hiding their children, trying to send their children away, retrieving their children, lost children, they just have a different story to tell, and that history hasn't historically been told, right? And I think women govern differently, they lead differently, and I think there's a shared history there that needs to be told. So I think that's why it's really important to have a day or time or week or month dedicated to women and acknowledging women's stories.
And contributions throughout history.
That's right.
As you mentioned, I never thought of it from that perspective, but even in war-torn countries, what is the role of women? So
right.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to our attention. So the theme for International Women's Day 2023 is Embrace Equity. Speaking from your own experiences, what equitable advances have you witnessed in the workplace during your career journey? Or what do you think should have happened but hasn't yet?
Well, it's been a long journey now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the point where it's been a long journey. The one thing that stuck with me when I did library science in my education, and one of the professors that I was taking a kind of a women's issues course with, she provided a piece of information that stayed with me, and she let us know that the field or discipline of library science is about 80% female, yet the senior leadership or CEO, chief librarians, 80% male. So her point was that we're drawing leadership from about 20% of the talent pool, and that stayed with me. So it's really influenced my work with young women and trying to continue to support women in leadership. So what's good and what's been advancing is there are many more women in leadership today than there were when I started my career. Women are becoming more assertive about balance, family life, flexibility, which is good, and they're making progress. In colleges, like in the college system, women do represent over 50% of the leadership. So that's been for quite some time now. So that's a really great thing for women leadership in higher education. And you know, when you look at schools too, women have grown in big numbers in law schools, medical schools, trades, engineering, business, that kind of thing. So the growth of women in leadership across the board has been really positive. When I think about things that should happen, I think about that whole issue of balance, that women still carry the heavier load typically at home with family and work. And I've always believed that if anyone who doesn't recognize that the importance of raising children and giving parents the mental space to be with their children and the emotional space and so on probably shouldn't be in post-secondary education, because we're about potential and development and self-esteem and helping people learn and grow. And they're all things that are formed foundationally during childhood. So I think there's a few leaders that might still be slow to understand that. And I think that if we don't realize that men, both women and men, more and more now too, are asking for that flexibility, we'll be missing out on really exceptional employees, and we'll miss the point, I think, of education. I've always thought what we do is related to all of that flexibility in that space. Just a final mention of numbers. Today, I represent our college at a provincial committee, and they're leaders in similar roles to mine. There's 24 colleges. There are about 9 of the women at that table or 9 of the people at the table are women, and of those 9, I'd say about 4 or 5 are VP. So if you think about that, it's 24 colleges. So we're still looking at a significant percentage of women not coming into senior leadership, yet student services across the board is probably about 90% female.
Right.
So where are we drawing the leadership from, right, would be the question. Caveat, I work with a lot of great men at that table, but yeah, just an important piece of information. Yeah.
Yes, we have to balance those numbers, and now that Fanshawe is recognized as an approved 50-30 hub, hopefully we're going to be working towards more equity in those leadership role numbers.
Yeah, that's great.
So I want to speak to you about yesterday. You just happened to mention to me that you were watching the Women in Excellence Awards, and that made me think that you yourself have been a recipient of that award. And can you share a little bit about that experience? What year was it, first of all?
It was 2 years ago. So they do these awards every 2 years. So I was in the 2021 cohort. It's just a huge honor, right? And you don't always think about your work until somebody does something like this and nominates you for something, and then you're starting to think about what's the meaning behind your work and so on. So I found it kind of a little bit of a journey, getting nominated and then going through and then meeting the other really exceptional women in the different categories. Yeah, and it does make you reflect a lot on what's important in leadership, why it's important for women to be a significant component of leadership, both at work and globally and so on, right? So yeah, it was a really great experience. And I've met a lot of really great women, and we're still connecting a little bit now too. So
and networking, because that happened during COVID. So now you've probably had a chance that we've come out of lockdown to meet and network in person.
Yep, I've met when I went. What I was at recently was the media announcement for this year's cohort, and I did a couple of the others that were in the 2021 were there. We were all meeting in person. It was great. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that award, and I'm sure very well deserved.
Thank you.
So speaking of the award and recognizing women in excellence, what advice would you give to young women who are trying to forge a career of their own in academia?
I think one big thing is to remember that there's power. Women struggle to be heard sometimes in the workplace, right? And they still do today. So I think there's power in collective voice, and I think that women could bringing people together into task teams, committees, and even informally in discussion groups is a great way to bring a collective voice to an issue and therefore be heard on the issue. Also finding mentors. I think it's really important to have a mentor. I had some great mentors early in my career when I was younger, and they really did help me to, they shaped my thinking and shaped some of my choices that I made later on. also, in addition to sort of leading committees and so on, just even doing something outside of your department. So if you're in a particular department in an organization, get involved in a committee or something that's more broad, in our case, college-wide, for example, where you can kind of broaden your perspective and work on things that are outside the norm of your day. It's a great learning opportunity. It's a great way to remember the meaning behind your work too, and to a certain degree to see other people, to see who you are and know who you are, right? So they'd probably be my core pieces of advice.
I totally agree with that piece of advice about getting involved, especially in the community. And I think about my own journey and my own path and how all the different pieces of things I've been involved with outside of my job here at Fanshawe have led eventually to this role. So it's important, and you never know where that path's going to lead you.
Yeah,
so
true.
Wrapping up with one final thought, Michelle, quickly, who inspires you? Is there a woman that has inspired you?
There has been two, in fact,
Okay.
professionally. Pat Lang, who was back when I was at Georgian, she was the vice president academic at Georgian, and later the president of Confederation College after I left Georgian. She came from a nursing background, and I found that gave her tremendous perspective on life and what was important. And she was a practicing nurse prior to coming to the college system. She respected the expertise of everybody around her, and she was really humble enough to seek input from and seek advice from the people who reported to her. And also, she took the time to understand people. So that taught me a lot about kind of time with people and so on. And personally, probably a lot of people do mention their mothers, but in my case, it's a very important mentor and role model. She's one of the most empathetic people I know, and taught me, the main lesson I've learned from her is that every person has a story that's worthy of me to hear, that I hear their story. And that is something that I learned and have taken sort of into my work as well.
And I'm sure that is a very important trait in your role and the number of people that you come into contact with during the daily process of your job. So
oh yeah, the work is very, very people focused, and dealing with also the interactions and dynamics of students and staff and all. Yeah, it's really quite interesting. Yeah.
And as someone that has been lucky enough to have a number of conversations with you, I can say that you bring that to your role, and you are a very good listener.
Thank you.
So on that note, we're going to wrap up. I would like to thank Michelle very much for taking the time to speak with us and have a chat about this today. And if any of our viewers would like to have a chat or have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Our email address is simply edi@fanshawec.ca. Join us for EDI Talks in April, when our subject will be sexual assault awareness. On behalf of the EDI team, take care of yourself and each other.